The old man leans over and asks his wife, "Do you remember the first time we had sex together over 50 years ago? We went behind the village tavern where you leaned against the back fence and I made love to you." "Yes," she says, "I remember it well." "Okay," he says, "how about taking a stroll around there again and we can do it for old time's sake?" "Oh, Jim, you old devil, that sounds like a crazy, but good idea." A police officer sitting in the next booth heard their conversation and, having a chuckle, he thinks to himself, "I've got to see these two old-timers having sex against a fence. I'll just keep an eye on them so there's no trouble." So he follows them. The elderly couple walks haltingly along, leaning on each other for support, aided by walking sticks. Finally, they get to the back of the tavern and make their way to the fence. The old lady lifts her skirt and the old man drops his trousers. As she leans against the fence, the old man moves. They erupt into the most furious sex that the policeman has ever seen. This goes on for about 10 minutes while both are making loud noises and moaning and screaming. Finally, they both collapse, panting on the ground. The policeman is amazed. He thinks he has learned something about life and old age that he didn't know. After about half an hour of lying on the ground, recovering, the old couple struggle to their feet and put their clothes back on. The policeman is still watching and thinks to himself, "This is truly amazing. I've got to ask them what their secret is." So as the couple passes, he says to them, "Excuse me, but that was something else. You must have had a fantastic sex life together. Is there some sort of secret to this?" Shaking, the old man is barely able to reply. 50 years ago, that wasn't an electric fence. After I retired, my wife insisted that I accompany her on her trips to Walmart. Unfortunately, like most men, I found shopping boring and preferred to get in and get out. Equally unfortunate, my wife is like most women. She loves to browse. Yesterday, my dear wife received the following letter from the local Walmart. "Dear Mrs. Harris, over the past 6 months, your husband has caused quite a commotion in our store. We cannot tolerate this behavior and have been forced to ban both of you from the store. Our complaints against your husband, Mr. Harris, are listed below and are documented by our video surveillance cameras. June 15th, he took 24 boxes of condoms and randomly put them in other people's carts when they weren't looking. July 2nd, set all the alarm clocks in housewares to go off at 5-minute intervals. July 7th, he made a trail of tomato juice on the floor leading to the women's restroom. July 19th, walked up to an employee and told her, in an official voice, "Code 3 in housewares. Get on it right away." This caused the employee to leave her assigned station and receive a reprimand from her supervisor. That in turn resulted with a union grievance, causing management to lose time and costing the company money. August 14th, moved a caution wet floor sign to a carpeted area. August 15th, set up a tent in the camping department and told the children's shoppers he'd invite them in if they would bring pillows and blankets from the bedding department, to which 20 children obliged. August 23rd, when a clerk asked if they could help him, he began crying and screamed, "Why can't you people just leave me alone?" EMTs were called. September 4th. Looked right into the security camera and used it as a mirror while he picked his nose. September 10th. While handling guns in the hunting department, he asked the clerk where the antidepressants were. October 3rd. Darted around the store suspiciously while loudly humming the Mission Impossible theme. October 6th. In the auto department, he practiced his Madonna look by using different sizes of funnels. October 18th, hid in a clothing rack and when people browsed through yelled, "Pick me, pick me!" October 21st. When an announcement came over the loudspeaker, he assumed a fetal position and screamed, "Oh no, it's those voices again!" And last, but not least, October 23rd. Went into a fitting room, shut the door, waited a while, then yelled very loudly, "Hey, there's no toilet paper in here." After Mrs. Jacobs found out her husband was sterile, the couple decided to hire a proxy father to start their family. On the day the proxy father was to arrive, Mr. Jacobs kissed his wife and said, "I'm off to work, Lydia. The guy should be here soon. Wouldn't you know it? A door-to-door baby photographer came by half an hour later, hoping to make a sale." Mrs. Jacobs answered the door. "Good morning, ma'am. You don't know me, but I've come to—" "Oh yes, I know why you're here," Mrs. Jacobs interrupts. "Harry told me you'd be coming today." "He did, but I—" "Come right in," Mrs. Jacobs interrupts again. "No use wasting time." "Very well then," replies the baby photographer. The photographer took out his briefcase and sat down. "As you may already know, I've made a specialty of babies." "Good, I'm glad," said Mrs. Jacobs. "That's just what Harry and I were looking for." "I usually like to try 2 in the bathtub, 1 on the couch, and perhaps a couple on the bed," said the photographer. "The living room floor is fun too. You can really spread out." Mrs. Jacobs gasps, "Bathtub, living room floor. No wonder it never worked for Harry and me." "Well, ma'am," continued the photographer, "none of us can guarantee a perfect one every time. But if we try several different positions and I shoot from 6 or 7 different angles, I think you'll be quite pleased with the results." "I certainly hope we can get this over with quickly," Mrs. Jacobs muttered nervously. "Ma'am, in my line of work, a man must take his time. I'd like to be in and out in 5 minutes, but you'd be disappointed with that, I'm sure." "Don't I know it?" whispered Mrs. Jacobs. The photographer pulled out a portfolio of his pictures. "This one was done on top of a bus in downtown London," he said, showing Mrs. Jacobs the picture. "Oh my God!" exclaimed Mrs. Jacobs, tugging on her handkerchief. "And these twins turned out exceptionally well when you consider the fact that their mother was so difficult to work with." He showed Mrs. Jacobs another picture. "She was difficult?" questioned Mrs. Jacobs. "Extremely," said the photographer. "I finally had to take her to Hyde Park to get the job done right. People were crowding around, 4 and 5 deep, just to get a good look." 4 and 5 deep? Mrs. Jacobs was amazed. "Yes," said the photographer, "and for more than 3 hours too. The mother was constantly squealing and yelling. I could hardly concentrate. Then it started getting dark, and I had to rush my shots. Finally, when the squirrels started nibbling on my equipment, I just packed it all in." Mrs. Jacobs leaned forward. "You mean the squirrels actually chewed on your, equipment?" "Yes, ma'am. Thank God, no real damage was done." "Well, we'll get to work as soon as I set up my tripod." "Tripod?" Mrs. Jacobs looked extremely worried now. "Of course, I need to use a tripod to rest my Canon on. It's much too big for me to hold while I'm getting ready for action." Madam, good God, she's fainted." On the first day, God created the first dog and said, "Sit all day by the door of your house and bark at anyone who comes in or walks past. For this, I will give you a lifespan of 20 years. The dog said, That's a long time to be barking. How about only 10 years, and I'll give you back the other 10? So God agreed. On the second day, God created the first monkey and said, "Entertain people, do tricks, and make them laugh. For this, I'll give you a 20-year lifespan." The monkey said, "Monkey tricks for 20 years? That's a pretty long time to perform. How about I give you back 10 like the dog did?" And God agreed. On the third day, God created the first cow and said, "You must go into the field with the farmer all day long and suffer under the sun, have calves, and give milk to support the farmer's family. For this, I will give you a lifespan of 60 years. The cow said, "That's kind of a tough life you want me to live for 60 years. How about 20 and I'll give back the other 40? And God agreed again. On the fourth day, God created man and said, "Eat, sleep, play, marry, and enjoy your life. For this, I'll give you 20 years. But man said, "Only 20 years? Could you possibly give me my 20? The 40 the cow gave back, the 10 the monkey gave back, and the 10 the dog gave back. That makes 80 years. Okay?" "Okay," said God. "You asked for it." So that's why, for our first 20 years, we eat, sleep, play, and enjoy ourselves. For the next 40 years, we slave in the sun to support our family. For the next 10 years, we do monkey tricks to entertain the grandchildren. And for the last 10 years, we sit on the front porch and bark at everyone. Subscribe to the channel. This is important. It will help me continue my work.